Stop wasting money chasing overpriced 1970s silver-face receivers. Those big golden era monsters that used to sit on Craigslist for a couple $100 now regularly sell for $1,000 or more, if you can even find one that doesn't need a full restoration. Most people are getting priced out and they're missing the real bargain sitting right under their noses. This video is about the best undervalued vintage stereo equipment left. Tough, reliable receivers and speakers from the 1980s and 1990s that still sound good, still work after decades of abuse, and can often be picked up for under $100, sometimes for free. I've used this gear daily in the shop, in customer homes, and in my own garage. Some of it has taken more punishment than it has any right to survive, and it just keeps playing. Let's start with the one that still surprises me the most. The indestructible workhorse, Onkyo TX-840 and its mid-ADS brothers. I currently have 3 Onkyo TX-840s in rotation around the shop. One has been the tattoo artist next door's daily driver for 5 years. He grabbed it on Facebook Marketplace for $50. Another has been my dedicated test receiver for 8 years. Every turntable, every pair of speakers that comes through the door gets hooked up to that TX-840 first. Think about how many shorted drivers, damaged crossovers, and sketchy connections that thing has seen. It doesn't even flinch. The third one is my loaner unit. When a customer's gear is in for repair, this is the receiver that goes home with them. It's been in more living rooms than I can count, and every single time it comes back, the person says the same thing: that's a really good receiver. These things are basically indestructible. A couple weeks before filming, I checked eBay and there were still around 10 working TX-840s listed at the same time. We still get them in regularly often as part of a complete system with a CD player and cassette deck, and they almost always power up and play without complaint. Most of the time I don't buy this era of equipment for the shop floor because the resale value is low and it takes up space that could hold something more profitable. We don't even service most of this stuff anymore because it's not cost effective. You can put 2 or 3 hours into troubleshooting a mid-ADS receiver that only sells for $100, $150 working. But here's the thing, the audio quality is nothing to sneeze at. These have a proper phono input, A, B speaker switching, and this particular model is rated around 60-65 watts per channel. They also have video inputs and outputs, a little precursor to the full 5.1 era that was just around the corner. By the time the 1990s really hit, a lot of manufacturers stopped trying to make the faceplates look interesting. Everything became a plain black box. The mid-ADS Onkyos still made an effort. I like the green and yellow display lighting. There are related models worth watching for too. The TX-85 and TX-65 were among the first Integra pieces, and I once sold an 85 to the same tattoo artist. That one is a really cool looking receiver. But the 840s seem to be everywhere, and that's actually a good sign. Here's a simple rule of thumb. If you're shopping 1980s and 1990s receivers on a budget, if you see 10 or more working examples listed on eBay at the same time, you're probably looking at a model that has proven it can keep running without constant service. Don't overlook the mid-ADS to early 90s Onkyos. You'll be missing out on something genuinely fun and genuinely cheap. Pioneer VSX 4900S and the early VSX line. This next one is personal. The VSX 4900S sitting here isn't the exact unit I bought new in 1991 or 1992, but it's the same model. Almost every example we see from this early Pioneer VSX series still works. They just keep going. These were among the early receivers with Dolby Pro Logic, so you get rear speakers and a center channel if you want to run a simple surround setup. More importantly for most of us, they still have a proper phono input and they still sound good in 2-channel stereo. There are plenty of related models from the same era, the VSX D, 1S, various 3000, 600S and 2000, 600S, and they share the same reputation for reliability. I don't think these look ugly at all. The yellow, red, and orange accents against the black faceplate still look sharp to me. And here's a real bonus that the 1970s gear never had: a remote control. Another practical detail, a lot of people forget about these, still have switched and unswitched AC outlets on the back, just like the older units. You can plug your CD player, tape deck, turntable, and EQ into the receiver and turn everything on and off with one switch. I wish modern receivers still did that. It keeps the system cleaner and simpler. You can find a decent working VSX 4900S for around $75. $75. Try finding anything that sounds this good and still works this reliably for that kind of money today. A lot of my affection for this model is sentimental, sure. I keep one in the back and pull it out when I want to feel a little nostalgic, but the performance still holds up. The ultimate garage tank, Sony STR-D615. This one isn't even in the shop. It's been living in my garage for 10 years. I sharpen lawnmower blades out there, I do woodworking. The temperature swings from freezing winters to hot, humid summers. I don't think I've ever cleaned the pots or given it any real maintenance. It still works. The only thing wrong with it is that the display is out, so I can't see what station I'm on. I usually just leave it on one station anyway and run a little Bluetooth adapter so I can play music from my phone. It was a freebie years ago, and it's still earning its keep every single day. When I checked eBay, there were 27 of these Sony STR-D615S listed at the same time. All but 3 were under $100. On a few of them, the shipping costs more than the receiver itself. That tells you everything you need to know about how robust these are. I almost bought a second one just to have a backup ready when this garage unit eventually gives up, if it ever does. I know some people will say this isn't real vintage. Vintage is usually defined as at least 20 years old, but less than 100. By that standard, anything from 2005 and earlier qualifies. For a 20-year-old buyer today, the 1990s already feel like history. These machines have earned their place. Speakers, the other half of the bargain. Don't sleep on the speakers from this same era. While everyone is busy chasing overpriced 1970s receivers, there are genuinely good bookshelf speakers from the 1990s and early 2000s sitting around for almost nothing. These are the speakers that get ignored because they don't have exotic wood veneers or famous badges from the golden age. Yet many of them still deliver honest, listenable sound that holds up far better than their current prices suggest. I've had a pair of PSB Alphas parked on the test bench for 5 solid years. Most of the amplifiers that come through the door for repair get hooked up to these first. For one simple reason, I'm not worried about blowing them up. They've taken shorted outputs, rough handling, and more than their share of abuse, and they just keep working. They're not pretty. The cabinets show wear, the grills look tired, and they would never make it onto the sales floor. That is exactly why they live on the bench. But the sound quality relative to what they cost is hard to argue with. When people walk through the shop and hear music playing, they often stop and ask what speakers are on. When I point to the beat-up PSBs, a lot of them look genuinely surprised. PSB is a Canadian company that has always focused more on performance than flash, and every pair of their speakers we've had in over the years has left the same impression, solid engineering, and better sound than the price tag implies. A few years ago, the internet got very excited about the Sony SS-CS5 sometimes listed under similar budget model numbers. You could buy them brand new on sale for around $100, and plenty of people online called them the best budget speakers you could buy. I picked up a pair just to hear what the fuss was about. I think they sound terrible. We put them on the wall one afternoon and let customers and staff B them against other speakers we had on hand. Almost everyone came to the same conclusion. The sound was thin, lifeless, and uninspiring. They didn't have any real weight in the lower mid-range, the treble felt etched rather than natural, and the overall presentation just sat there without any engagement. You can find a used pair of ordinary 1990s bookshelves for $40 or $50 that will outperform them without much effort. I'm not trying to attack anyone who likes the Sonys. If they make you happy, that's what matters. But in direct comparison, I would take a scuffed up pair of 1990 speakers over those new Sonys any day of the week. There are plenty of other lines from this period that reward a little digging. Polk made a lot of honest bookshelf and small floor-standing speakers in the 1990s that still turn up cheap and still sound balanced. The JBL Northridge series is another one worth watching. These were never exotic, but they often have a lively, forward character that works well for rock and everyday listening. The JBL HLS series sits in a similar category, straightforward designs that can sound surprisingly open and dynamic when you give them a little power. Boston Acoustics HD series speakers are another quiet source of bargains. Many of them have a clean, articulate mid-range and enough bass for small to medium rooms without needing a subwoofer. None of these will impress someone looking for furniture-grade cabinets or the last word in refinement. What they offer instead is real acoustic performance at prices that still feel almost unfair. The key is understanding what these speakers were designed to do. Most of them were built for normal living rooms, dorm rooms, and secondary systems. They were never meant to be statement pieces. Because of that, they never attracted the kind of collector attention that drives prices up. You can still find clean pairs for $50 to $100 if you are patient and rough, but working pairs for even less. For a garage system, a bedroom setup, a workshop, or just honest daily listening, they are tough to beat on pure value. Pair one of the reliable 1980s or early 1990s receivers we talked about earlier with a decent set of these bookshelves, and you suddenly have a complete system that costs less than many people spend on a single trendy gadget. The cosmetics will rarely be perfect. The cabinets may have dings, the grills may be faded, and the badges may not carry the same prestige as the big 1970s names. None of that changes how they sound when you turn the volume up and actually listen. In a market where clean 1970s speakers can demand serious money, these overlooked 1990s designs remain one of the last places where you can still buy real performance without paying a premium for nostalgia. They won't win any beauty contests. They will, however, play music day after day without complaint, and that is exactly what most people actually need. A few more worth watching. While the three receivers I spent the most time on are my personal favorites from this overlooked stretch of stereo history, they are far from the only ones worth your attention. Several other groups of machines from the mid-1980s through the early 1990s share the same practical strengths. They still show up in working condition with surprising frequency, they remain inexpensive, and they often sound better than their low prices and plain black faceplates would lead you to expect. Start with the broader mid to late 1980s Onkyo TX series. The TX-840 is the model I keep reaching for, but it sits inside a larger family of receivers that were built with the same no-nonsense approach. Onkyo was still taking two-channel performance seriously, even as the industry began shifting toward video switching and early surround features. Many of these TX models include a usable phono stage, A, B, speaker outputs, and enough clean power for normal listening levels in a living room, bedroom, or garage. What stands out most is how often they simply keep working. When you can still find multiple clean, functional examples of the same model listed at the same time for $75 to $150, that is not an accident. It is evidence that the basic engineering was solid enough to survive decades of ordinary use, occasional abuse, and long periods of neglect. These were never collector darlings, which is exactly why so many of them remain available and affordable today. Yamaha's natural sound receivers from the late 1980s and early 1990s form another strong group. Yamaha tended to aim for a cleaner, more neutral tonal balance than a lot of the warmer or more romantic gear that came out of the 1970s. That character can be a real advantage if you listen to a wide range of music or simply prefer accuracy over coloration. Many of these units still appear on the used market at very reasonable prices, often well under $150 for a complete working example that includes the original remote. Long-term owners frequently comment on how little ongoing maintenance these Yamahas seem to require. The tuners are generally competent, the amplifiers are stable, and the overall construction feels purposeful rather than cheap. They may not have the visual drama of a big silver-faced receiver from 10 years earlier, but they deliver consistent, fatigue-free performance that holds up well in daily use. Early Technics receivers from the same period deserve a look as well. Technics never developed the same cult following as the major 1970s brands, and that has kept prices low. Certain mid to late 1980s models still surface regularly in working order. They are rarely the prettiest machines in the room, and they do not usually win debates about the most refined mid-range or the deepest soundstage. What they often deliver is clean, usable power, a functional phono input, and the kind of straightforward reliability that makes them ideal for secondary systems, workshops, or anyone who simply wants music without drama. Because collector demand has stayed modest, you can still find decent examples without competing against people hunting for trophy pieces. Some of the simpler Pioneer models from the late 1980s and early 1990s also fit this pattern. Once Pioneer moved more aggressively into home theater features, the pure two-channel focus of their earlier flagship SX receivers began to dilute. Yet, the transitional models, certain later SX units, and the early VSX series beyond just the 4900S frequently retain respectable amplifiers and practical features while remaining far more affordable than their 1970s predecessors. When multiple working examples of the same Pioneer model appear in the market at once, it is usually a reliable signal that the underlying design has held up better than average. These machines rarely attract the same attention as the big silver-faced legends, which is precisely why they can still be bought and used without spending serious money. The common thread running through all of these groups is easy to see once you start looking. If a particular model remains relatively plentiful on the used market in actual working condition 35 or 40 years after it was built, the design was almost certainly robust enough to survive decades of average use without constant repairs. High survival rate is one of the most honest reliability indicators available. It is more meaningful than marketing claims from the original era and more useful than nostalgia-driven reputation. These receivers were not designed to become museum pieces. They were designed to be turned on and used, and a surprising number of them are still doing exactly that. This is why the mid-1980s to early 1990s window remains such a practical hunting ground. You are not competing with collectors chasing the last clean example of a famous 1970s model. You are looking at tools that still perform their basic job well, often for the price of a couple of nice dinners. The cosmetics may be plainer, the feature sets may include early video switching or remote controls that feel dated now, and the pure audiophile refinement of the best 1970s designs may be missing. What you gain instead is affordability, availability, and a level of real-world durability that many more celebrated machines struggle to match after the same number of years. If your goal is a dependable system for everyday listening, a garage setup that can take some abuse, or a secondary system that does not need to impress visitors, these overlooked receivers deserve serious consideration. The Onkyo TX family selected Yamaha natural sound models, certain Technics units, and the more straightforward Pioneer SX and early VSX machines all offer a combination of survival rate, low cost, and usable performance that is increasingly hard to find in the more fashionable corners of the vintage market. They will not satisfy someone hunting for the last word in mid-range texture or the most dramatic faceplate lighting. They will, however, play music reliably for years, and they will do it without demanding a large investment or constant attention. That practical combination is exactly what makes this forgotten stretch of stereo history still worth exploring. Why this era is still the sweet spot? The 1970s get all the romance, and for good reason. The build quality, the aesthetics, and the pure two-channel performance of the best 70S receivers are hard to top. But that romance has a price tag now. The 1980s and 1990s gear was built during the transition into the home theater era. A lot of it still had real phono stages, decent amplifiers, and the kind of straightforward engineering that just works. Because it never became collectible in the same way, the prices stayed low while the reliability stayed high. That's the opportunity. You're not buying a museum piece, you're buying a tool that still does the job often for less than the cost of a nice dinner. If you've been priced out of the classic silver face era, or if you just need something honest and affordable that won't quit on you, this is where you should be looking. The Onkyo TX-840 and its siblings, the early Pioneer VSX receivers, the Sony STR-D615, and a good pair of 1990s bookshelves will get you further than most people realize. Go dig around on the local marketplace, check the thrift stores, and watch the cheap listings on the auction sites. The bargains are still there, they're just wearing black faceplates instead of silver ones, and when you find one that still works after 30+ years of real-world use, you'll understand why some of us keep coming back to this overlooked chapter of stereo history.